When I was a kid learning to play chess and then reading a lot about chess history and the great players of the past, I mean, you come across this idea that they could play blindfold chess, and how this developed over time when it was considered a miracle to play 3 games at once in the time of Philidor, who was the best player in the world in the 18th century. And then I wanted to try it myself and found that I could actually do 1 game, then try to do 2 games and 3 games, and I did 5 games when I was about 14 at school. Okay, but then after that, there's very little chance to get these things organised. It's because you need someone who knows the moves to be able to transmit the coordinates accurate from one to the other. When I was about 21, I did 6 games. In that case, it was just transmitting moves to the individuals without a caller. And it really wasn't until I started working for Creation Ministry that we thought it might be a good idea to try this again. So I was already in my 30s before I started doing this again. So in America, I tried 5 games and then 6 games at a conference and found I could still do it. And then raised the limit to 8 and then 10. Then I tried 11 games at a chess club where I had some proper experienced chess players against me, including one lady who was in the women's chess team for New Zealand. And I won all 11 of those games. That has to be my best result, getting 11 out of 11 at a chess club as well. At the 2009 Creation Ministry Super Camp, I played 8 simultaneous blindfold games and won all of them. Well, people ask me how I do it. I don't really know how I do it myself. Okay, it's a bit like trying to tell a man who's been blind from birth what colour means. It's just not possible to do it for someone who doesn't understand it. What I don't think I'm doing is seeing chessboards in my mind as such, as opposed to a grid with PowerPoints on it, like a rook I probably see as something which is radiating horizontally and vertically, and not much more than that. A bishop I see something is radiating diagonally, and that's sort of what I'm seeing. And also at any one time I'm only concentrating on the ball at hand, and then I put that out of my mind and move on to the next one, recall the position. Possibly there's some cues about how the opening has gone to help me recall that, and then again it's only 1 game I'm concentrating on at a time.
Board 4, Bishop, Echo, 6.
One of the occupational hazards of playing these blindfold games is that you can forget where some pieces are because you haven't got the board in front of you as a visual clue. When Larry Christensen, Grand Master, former US champion, he tried to play 10 people blindfolded, and in 6 of those games he lost the thread of them and went down. Vladimir Kramnik, who was the 14th world champion, said he wouldn't want to try more than 3 at a time because it would be too much of a strain. Dangers of blindfold, well, this has been said for a long time. Like when Philidor did 3 blindfold games at once, people had to sign affidavits because they thought that the people in the future would not believe that such a thing was possible. And this is talking about the 18th century, so they thought it was too hard for anyone to do. In the Soviet Union, they outlawed blindfold chess, but the thing is, in communist countries, they will outlaw silly things like that. And there are people I know who've tried these blindfold simuls and had huge headaches afterwards. But really, I mean, okay, it's a very tiring thing to do. I'm certainly mentally fatigued after one of them, but I don't think it's a health hazard for me either.
Rook takes Foxtrot 2.
It's been said that possibly playing blindfold is an advantage because there are no distractions. Well, I'd actually just then challenge someone to go ahead and do it. Refuting Evolution was my first book, and I think it was quite popular with 500,000 sales copies sold now, because it was a response to the National Academy of Sciences teacher's guidebook called Teaching About Evolution and the Nature of Science, which was given to all the high schools across America to try to indoctrinate kids into evolution with their latest and greatest evidence. Even had dialogues about how do you deal with a creationist student in your class, what you do about it, and here are all these religious leaders who say evolution's okay. So all these different things, the fossil record, the so-called missing links, here's proof of things changing to something else, all the latest and greatest evidence. And so my book went through this fairly systematically to try to present a rebuttal that high school kids and university students could do. And it started off with things like the whole issue of facts and biases, and showing that both sides have biases, showing the Christian basis of modern science, and then showed why their bait and switch idea falls down. Bait and switch is the formal name for this fallacy is called equivocation, where you're using the same word in different senses and switching them over throughout the argument. You see, what the Dawkins does, and a lot of evolutionists do, is they'll define evolution as meaning change, any sort of change. They'll show, here's an example of something changing to something else, and then they'll claim creationists deny evolution, therefore they must deny things are changing, and therefore they must be stupid because you can see things changing in front of your eyes. But in fact, what creationists disbelieve is this whole big picture thing of particles turning into people. And that is where the issue is. So by switching evolution to say it means change of gene frequency over time or something, it's a dishonest caricature, because no creationist ever denies it. I mean, if that was what evolution is, we'd all be evolutionists here. Well, see, Richard Dawkins has long been known as one of the champions of neo-Darwinism, and he's also known as a strident atheist, an anti-theist I'd even call him, who hates Christianity. He wrote the book called The God Delusion, trying to attack the idea of a creator God and attack all theistic religions and defend atheism as the only way to go. And of course, atheism depends strongly on evolution, because without evolution, atheists have no answer to where did all the complexity of life come from. This is what Dawkins himself says. But then his latest book, The Greatest Show on Earth, The Evidence for Evolution, is subtitled this way because he admits that his previous books really assumed evolution to be true, answered a few points raised about it, but never actually sent out the evidence to prove it. Well, my book is titled The Greatest Hoax on Earth, ? Deliberately to parallel Dawkins' title, The Greatest Show on Earth. See, the thing is, the title of my book's on a question mark because I'm not accusing evolutionists of telling lies especially. I'd say what they've done is they've got a presupposition of materialism, which is that matter is all that exists, and what they're doing follows perfectly from that presupposition. A lot of people think of faith as believing what you know isn't so, or believing 6 impossible things before breakfast, but that's not the way the Bible talks about faith. And in fact, in the New Testament, the apostles were preaching about the faith and using evidence, for instance, evidence that Jesus rose from the dead, evidence of his miracles, evidence of fulfilled prophecy. Never in the Bible was faith a blind faith, devoid of any evidence. And therefore, what I'm talking about is the power of using evidence and, in fact, logical thinking to defend the Christian faith, which I believe is a perfectly logical and defensible faith. Yeah, see, the evolutionary faith, I believe, is more of the caricature of what most people think of by faith. It is actually a blind faith. I mean, because no one has ever seen something coming from nothing, which is what the Big Bang teaches, that in the beginning there was nothing, null, nada, and then it exploded and became everything. That's the Big Bang teaching. And no one has ever seen life coming from non-living chemicals. Every time you eat canned food, you've got all the chemicals required for life, but no life has ever formed them there, providing it's been sealed and sterilized properly. So the idea of life coming from non-life is part of blind faith. And then they have to believe that amoral matter became morally thinking human beings. So they take a lot of things on what I would say is blind faith. Well, my earned doctorate is in physical chemistry, in particular spectroscopy, where for instance, I shine laser light on selenium and look at the scattered light, and from that I'll be able to tell the vibrational frequencies of the molecule, and therefore how strong the bonds were within and between the molecules. That's what I was researching, using spectroscopy as a tool. And of course, this is real operational science that doesn't require evolution to work. So Yet the Dawkinses of the world are claiming that if you haven't got evolution, all science goes out the window, but you don't need evolution for spectroscopy. I can testify to that. And in fact, to the contrary, most of the fields that I study were founded by creationist scientists.